on?
I think it's fair to say that in the history of philosophy, theories of human nature come up as tools to answer other questions. Or philosophers ask questions and then they realize that those questions either lead them to theories of human nature, or that a theory of human nature has to be arrived at in order to answer the question. So yeah, there are philosophy books, philosophers who have looked into human nature for its own sake, but usually that's not true. And at least in the sort of classics of the history of philosophy, human nature comes up when other questions are asked. For instance, when Plato asked, what is justice and should I be just or not, he provided a theory of human nature to give a ground for his answer to those questions. And here with Descartes, clearly Descartes did not set out, at least foremost in his mind, to characterize our being, what we were as human beings. He was asking a different question, and that is, as we know from reading the first meditation, what do I know? What do I, René Descartes, really know? What can I be sure that I know? That is really the driving question. What do I know? How do I know that I know anything? Descartes knew that he didn't know. And he knew that he thought he knew when he didn't know. That is, he'd made mistakes. He knew he'd been deceived, and he wanted to come up with a method for certainty. That is, there's all sorts of things that he thinks he knows, but since he's been wrong about what he thought he knew before, is there any way to be sure that he really knows what he thinks he knows? And he comes up with a method we're introduced to. He employs in the first meditations. We're just reading meditations 1 and 2. And that is the so-called method of doubt. That is, the idea is that anything that is undoubtable, that is, if there's anything that he thinks is true and cannot doubt its truth, that is, if it's impossible for him to have any doubt at all about the truth of a proposition, then the idea is that that's got to be true. So he's looking for the indubitable, which basically means the undoubtable. Is there anything that he thinks he knows which cannot be doubted? If there is any such thing, then that'll be his rock, right? What do I know? Well, I might know a lot of things, but I can't really be sure that I know them. But at least that which I think I know and cannot be doubted, which I can find no grounds at all for skepticism, that I can be most sure of, and that can serve as the foundation of my knowledge. And build his ultimate aim here in the meditations as a whole is to build up his knowledge of reality from the firmest and most secure possible foundation. We're not going to follow that all the way through because, again, our interests are somewhat different than Descartes', as we're interested in the characterization of human nature that emerges from this larger enterprise of finding something, if there is indeed anything, which is certainly true. Because the idea is that if he finds something that's indubitable, that's just undoubtable, then he can be certain of its truth. And that's really what the path of thinking that we follow. Descartes is really subjecting everything that he thinks he knows and the great variety of things, things about the physical world learned through the senses. That is, he starts with a whole collection of things that he thinks that he knows, but there are different kinds. Things about the physical world that we learn through the senses, just through seeing and hearing and touching, but also the basic truths of logic and mathematics, which are not truths that pertain to the physical world, but are theoretical truths, you might say. Abstract or ideal truths that seem to him to be harder to doubt, but he finds room for doubt, just as he finds room for doubt of the things learned through the senses. And then finally, he believes in God, and that's a very strong thing for him to try to doubt, but he finds room for doubt of that too. So overall, what he's looking for in these first meditations is whether there are grounds for doubt, whether his belief in these things, the things he's learned through the senses, the basic truths of logic and mathematics, and the existence of God, whether these things are truly undoubtable or indubitable. And he finds, or he argues, that they are indeed doubtable, that you can find ways within this method of doubt to find grounds for doubting any of these things. So the question is whether then there's anything indubitable at all. And that is, I can doubt that the cell phone is in my hand. I can doubt that 1 and 1 make 2. I can doubt that God exists. But is there anything I can't doubt? And of course, what we get is that he cannot doubt that he is thinking. I can doubt whether there is a full cup of coffee on the table in front of me right now. I can doubt that because I know that I have that belief through my senses, and that my senses sometimes deceive me. I could be dreaming, right? And there could be no coffee cup at all, no table, and I could not be sitting here right now. I can't really prove that I'm not dreaming. So there's some, however slender, grounds for doubt of that. I can doubt that 1 and 1 make 2 in the sense that I can believe that I'm being deceived in my grasp of the fundamental intuitive principles of mathematics. I can doubt a lot. I can seemingly doubt all that things, but I can't doubt that I'm thinking. I can doubt that there's a cup right now, but I can't doubt that I'm perceiving what appears to be a cup. I can doubt whether 1 and 1 really make 2, but I can't doubt that I'm thinking that 1 and 1 make 2. I can doubt whether God exists, but I can't doubt that I'm thinking of whether God exists, or I'm thinking that God exists, or I'm thinking that God doesn't exist. I can't doubt that I am thinking. Now, this leads to our main area of interest here, a characterization of himself as a certain type of being. But it obviously also brings up all sorts of other problems. That the only, that is, if the only thing I can be sure of is my own subjective activity as a perceiving, thinking creature, then it would seem that I'm locked into the idea that all I can perceive are my own thoughts and perceptions, and therefore that I can never really prove either that any of them are true, or I can't, amounts to the same thing. I can't prove that any of my thoughts and perceptions, which seem to be about an outside world, are really correct. So this is kind of like the reason people are down on Descartes, but we'll pick it up from there.